Hello, this is Phil Eklund of Madre Games. I'm a game designer and I've been working on this particular game for 20 years or something. This is a BIOS Origins second edition. The first edition is something like this. You show that. Yeah, that's the first edition. When did that come out?
2007, I believe.
Yeah.
No, we don't have the back here, but I think it's 2007. And my name is Jon Manker from Ion Game Design, and I have been working on this particular game 1.5 years maybe, but
Yeah.
not on this one, which is Phil's legendary bang into the German game industry.
Yes, this was my first one published in Germany, the first one in 2 languages. And the first one to enjoy any level of success in a Civ game. I've tried various Ice Age simulations before, but this is something I really wanted to do, and my son Matthew and I have been working on it. So, what are your impressions of the game now that we've been playtesting it pretty intensively for the last...
Well, my impressions of the game is that it's starting to play the way we both like, I think. It's intense all through the eras of the game. It is, you are constantly faced with interesting and somewhat difficult choices. And it's a connection between the game mechanic and the reality like no other Civ game I know. And it's also has a backdrop which is dense with information.
And it starts much earlier than most Civ games.
It also starts much earlier, partly because it's the third part in the BIOS trilogy, and the second part, BIOS Megafauna, ended at 4 million years ago, give or take a million year. And then, so this one starts there. It starts 4 million years ago, and it ends in current days.
Yes. So you mentioned that there's 4 epochs that you have to go through.
There are 4 epochs.
And each one is something of an adventure in itself, ended by a real upheaval in human history as they rearrange their thoughts, their ways of thinking, their lifestyles, various cultural and agricultural revolutions, the advent of consciousness, the age of reason. So these 4 epochs are punctuated by very somewhat chaotic times as humans have to readjust to the new ways of thinking that are confronting them now. And it's not an easy road into modernity.
No, it is. It's chaos all the way.
Well, there are periods of chaos and periods of relative calm and build-up. It's a Tableau building game. We've set up 2 players here. We have Neanderthals versus the Hobbits. And this is roughly a period when there were 4 species inhabiting Eurasia and Africa.
4 million years ago.
Yeah, 4 million years. Well, yes, there's 2 variations. One is 4 million year, the first, or even 2 million years ago, the first diaspora out of Africa. And the identity of the species is a little bit different, but this is only about 200,000 years ago, when there were hobbits, Denisovians, Neanderthals, and sapiens in the world, and that's when we're beginning right now. And so we've got Epoch 1 cards in a tableau, which is traditional now, well, for PAX games, but this is only really the first time it appears in this form in...
Yeah, we had it in Megafauna.
Yeah, you had something of this in Megafauna, but the idea that you can choose or syndicate or decide to try to develop by placing your intellectia, your intellectuals or elders, as we call them, onto the things that you're trying to develop, and they get more expensive when they're closer to the draw decks, and less expensive there. This is a market mechanism which allows you to sort of foresee what's coming and plan ahead. Planning ahead is a really human attribute. Most animals don't have the lingual capacity to do planning. And we also have a tripartite tableau. This is for the Hobbit here, player Green, who's starting down in Indonesia. We've got culture, politics, and industry. And so he's already building up his industry a little bit in his culture. And the higher he builds it up, the more options he will have during his turn. But the more actions you'll be able to take that are listed on the card. But you can't fall in love with this because revolutions might shift the ruling class from culture perhaps to politics or so, and the ideas then that were suitable for culture might have to, let's just pretend that the hobbits.
So this one is one of these cultures or one of these ways of thinking or value systems,
disciplines, we call
disciplines are in power in your culture, and the hobbits had the artistic, spiritual, cultural part there, whereas the Neanderthal in this game state is more to the industry side, and you have to translate that word to whatever it means in that epoch. So now, for some reason, they shift.
Industry is an archaeological term. They call flint knapping industry just based upon the artifacts. So this is actually perhaps it may sound modern, but it's actually a pretty ancient term. Used for ancient phenomenon is what I meant to say, not an ancient term.
No. So, but what you do when you do this is that any ideas that you have here, and you may have, depending on how much information technology you have in your culture, you may have more than one idea. You take the ideas, in this case one, and check them on the other side, because if they're here, they are green, but this can also be in another place. And this is the idea of fitted clothes. So fitted clothes worked here, but it can also be in industry. But it's orange or red here, and it's green there. It has no blue, so it cannot go to politics. So politicians are not interested in clothes; they're interested in other things. And in this particular case, when you do this revolution, so to speak, then this idea goes to the.
We should mention that there's two types of cards. There's the idea cards, the technologies and inventiveness, not just technologies, new ways of governance and the like are found in the idea matrix here, the market. But we also have foundation cards, which are landscape here. And this particular discipline, culture, has 3 foundations. So if the, and actually I should have these here like this. I think I set this up incorrectly, as I keep doing, even in play testing.
I thought you did so to show the nice brain images.
Yes.
I know you're proud of them.
I am proud, well, it'll probably get changed. But if this particular mode of life, which is groom and gossip, went into revolt, it might shift around to its political side, and then the ruling class chit would be shifted to politics, and now we have political hobbits. And I can also mention that the hobbits have a presence of green on the map, as in the legacy origins. The hunter-gatherers, there'll be figures in the final version, can maneuver around the corner spots. But if you build cities, which is a major goal in this game, you put a little city cube say this one decided to domesticate the elephant. Here's a little elephant icon right here, and because of the instructions given on the cards during his phase, it allows him to domesticate. He can just take this migrant, this hunter-gatherer, and move it to the center and build a new city right here. We'll put it on the elephant to show. We'll put this back into his pool, and now his industrialization has increased from 4 to 5. Urbanization. Thank you. Urbanization has increased, which gives him a bit more knowledge actions per turn. The advantage of urban life for the elders, the supporting elders that you're trying to promote. You can also see that we've got possibility to play this game in a marine version. We can play it on a blank hex map and use the cratons from Bios Megafauna. These resources in the ocean are done only if Bios Megafauna ends up in a very oceanic world with the swimmer folk or merfolk, as we call them. You can see the climate discs here are, those should be familiar from Bios Megafauna. They're imported directly in. The ice can come and go, things can flood, these jungles might convert into deserts depending on the climate change. And we've got areas that can flood if the ice melts and the water table goes up. So we've got some adventurous things here, plus some catastrophes such as earthquakes and volcanoes that are traditional. I think you mentioned already these tracks.
I mentioned them briefly, and this is your technology and how you develop on them, and you basically just go up 6 steps to the top one, and that's spanning the entire evolution.
Yeah, well, I'll just mention them very briefly. This purple track here is called energy. This starts with just fire use and then goes to pottery, wind power, steam, oil, and nuclear energy at the top. So you've got the full gamut of possibilities in this game. The footprint, how many units can a hex support before they start to starve, is kept track of here. Hunter-gatherer, wandering herdsman, slash and burn agriculture, short fallow farming, industrial monoculture, and finally the green revolution. Metallurgy is used in combat, for instance. Are you in the Stone Age, Copper Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age, and so forth? Immunology, how well you are resistant to diseases. This is from the Legacy Origins and ultimately stems from popular books such as Guns, Germs, and Steel. Here's the germs, here's the guns.
Also how well you are equipped to survive in jungles is...
against mosquitoes, malarial mosquitoes. I'm just returned from Madagascar, and where I had to worry about mosquitoes. I had to put on my ointments and sleep under nets and be very cautious. So even today, the jungles are not something easily reckoned with. Here's maritime, and you go all the way from just being able to swim to going into outer space, and finally information. This was your input, wasn't it?
I did, yes. Information was one thing I wanted to add, and I think we have after this addition evolved it together in a very good way, because now it's integrated in the game. It will let you, if you have many higher information, you can spend more elders into the intellectual area, and you also have as I mentioned before, the number of ideas you can have at the same time in your ruling class column is dependent on information. So it's become a very strong source.
The concept here is information. How much information can you store and transmit between generations. And if it's just word of mouth, it's not very good. But once you develop writing and alphabet and numbers and printing press, telegraphs, internet, it gets a lot better. And as you mentioned, you can keep and hold more ideas with higher information, and you can generate more smart people and unleash them on the world with high information. So
another thing about these tracks, because they are important, they are integrated in many areas of the game, and many of these cards, the tactics you do when you buy the cards and build up your tableau is to try and find ways to increase these tracks step by step, and many of these cards lets you to do that 1 or maybe 2 times before they're obsolete. But at the end of the day, how do you win the game? Well, you get points, of course, and a very important source of the points are these tracks. We have something called economy here, which are these 2 tracks, welfare for those 2, and environment for those 2. And this also represents 3 different scoring, 3 different scores you actually get. Each player gets 3 scores, and the highest is the one that you as a player chooses. And then there is a tactics of trying to go for 1, but also you need to have a little presence in the others, so that the other players don't run away with the game in another scoring area.
In a traditional Civ game, the object is to dominate the world. It puts you into a seat like a Napoleon. You want to get as strong as possible. You want all your minions to do your bidding and wipe out the enemy. And that's possible in this game, but that's only one mode of victory. That's a centralized power victory, discipline purple. There are 2 other styles of victory. The spiritual one, if you want to be very religious, or if you want to find nirvana or shamanism, or
focus on the cultural part,
or environment, because the spiritual adds their environmental factors into the final score. You don't even need map presence at all. And so far, spiritual players been doing pretty strong in our play test.
It might be because it's fun to try alternative winning conditions. I don't know, but it's we have had to nerf spiritual a little bit.
Yeah, and then there's also the Freedom Party or laissez-faire scoring, and you just try to get a very deep culture, a very diverse one. So you're trying to get as many elements as you can into your tableau, many of these foundation cards in particular, and you're also interested in your economy, information and maritime. And so they haven't been doing so badly either. You have interim scoring as you go through the epochs. At the end of each one, you will have some scoring, and you'll collect victory chits, and then you have a final scoring at the end. And
well, to follow up on that one, you said you have during the game. The game is really driven by, in a way, it's driven by the event or the challenge card deck, which also called event deck, but the challenge cards, and they're called challenge cards because you don't draw 1 each turn. Instead, you draw 1 when one of the players wants to draw 1.
Challenges the gods and throws a spear at the ceiling or something equally dramatic.
Yeah.
Or the sun, yes.
But they do challenge the gods, and this leads to a breakthrough of sorts. But it's not certain that you will get the breakthrough, because first events which could be difficult or good for you, you don't never know with the gods, and then things will happen to you or other players. The environment may change, and these things, and then you auction this off. So it's a real tactics to do this at the right point when you have the best situation and have the chance to win it if you want it, because what the gods give you might not be exactly the kind of foundation you want. It might even be a foundation. You may be in this, let's say I was in this red one over here, and I draw this foundation. There is no red here, so if I wanted to buy this, I am forced to do a silent revolution and change my ruling class. And usually that's a good idea, because these foundations are good for you. But you may also refrain from doing it and say give it to others. But it's an auction, and
You auction using your elders.
and the auction you use the elders, which could be intellectuals, they could be emissaries on other players' cards. And there is also this elder here, which is called a sacred elder.
Yeah, sacred elder. Your mystics are pretty good at challenging the gods.
Yeah, of course. And
So-
then, so you have, depending on how many players you have a number of these. And then in between each epoch, there are 4 epochs, so they are separated in 4 epochs. And in between them, there is this scoring you were talking about, which makes for a little mini race in the game. And then you're counting cities, basically.
For the interim scoring,
interim
for the
scoring.
epoch scoring.
Yeah, so the map is interesting throughout the game.
There's just one more thing I wanted to mention, that there's no dice in this game. If you remember the original Origins, it was kind of dice heavy, but this does not have it. So it's really up to you to succeed or fail, depending on what the gods tell you.
And I'm very happy about this, that we managed to make this into diceless. There was a little thing you forgot to mention about these brain maps. There were brain maps in the original game. It's usually appreciated by players to advance before someone else, and their brain your opponent has a lesser brain than you. That's always fun. And the brain maps are still here, but now they are a little more diverse. You have instinct and rationality, and then you can go.
Because starting 4 million years ago, humans didn't have a very big brain. They were microcephs, and so one point is to physically enlarge your brain and to physically interchange it, but also employing language as a cognitive tool is also signified on these brain maps.
So the bottom here is to enlarge it, and then you have your software or language upgrade, and then you can always take the shortcut with them out into the spiritual domain here, and so there are tactical things about how you grow your brain in this game.
Yeah, that's been pretty successful.
It's been successful, definitely.
Okay, all right. I think that's all we have time for. So thank you very much for listening about our exciting new project.
Yes, thank you.